Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. We are continuing our coverage of this year's Academy Awards, and today we welcome Oscar-nominated cinematographer Autumn Durald Arkapaw. She's here to talk about her work on Sinners, which has received a record-breaking 16 Oscar nominations. This is actually our third episode about this particular film. We previously talked about the movie's score and the sound design and mix, so be sure to check out those previous conversations as well. But today we are discussing Best Cinematography and the richly deserved nomination for Autumn's work on Sinners. But before we jump into the interview, just a quick programming note. Because I've been a little under the weather with a touch of Oscar fever, our producer Michael Coleman graciously stepped in to host this conversation. So I will let Michael take it from here.
Autumn, I'm so excited to have you on the Dolby podcast. I just want to say congratulations on this nomination. For me, I always wonder where people are when they hear about their nomination. Where were you, and what did that feel like?
I was at home because I don't, it was really early. I think I had to get up at like 5, I think, or a little bit before 5. But I was home with my husband, who's also a DP, and we have a son, but I didn't wake him up, and so I watched it on my television with him really early, and he recorded it, and my parents were up. They live nearby, and so yeah, I mean, I think mostly it was shocking to be able to get so many for all of our team, which is amazing because everyone worked so hard and did such an amazing job, and to be able to celebrate with everyone's been pretty cool. But no, it was a nice feeling because it's a dream come true for sure.
It's a wonderful milestone. I've been following your work for a long time. I've really enjoyed learning more about your background, with this art history background, and then going to AFI and getting your MFA for cinematography. But there was a story that I came across you talking about getting invited to the set of Bill Pope.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Can you just share that again? Because I think you can learn so much, but then when you get boots on the ground and you're on set, it's totally different. What do you remember from that experience? Why was it so important to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I texted him that interview the other day. And so early on, let's see. So I went to AFI, and then actually the first time I applied to AFI, I didn't get in. And I forget how this occurred, but through a friend, I was introduced to a producer who was really good friends with Bill. Or the producer's wife was really good friends with Bill and Mary Lambert. Jerome Gary was the producer. And so they knew I was, looking to kind of, meet a DP and, get some kind of mentorship. And so they connected me with Bill, and then he invited me to his commercial set, which I think was shooting on I was telling him this in text the other day. I think it was on Warner Brothers a lot. How funny is that? So I went to visit him, and it was the first kind of set I had been on, because this was before AFI. So I hadn't even gone to AFI yet. And yeah, I was blown away. I mean, Bill is very commanding presence, and he's very cool. And so I remember watching him and, having a great experience talking to all of his crew, asking a bunch of questions. And it was just a magical day because I was like, I want to do this. I was interested in it before, but I remember that day feeling really excited. And then he invited me. They had a wrap dinner for the commercial. It was a big commercial. And so I got to go to that and meet everyone. And I just remember being so happy at the end of that day, going like, I would like to do this. This looks really cool. And we stayed close since then. He's always been in my life, and whenever I had questions, I would hit him up, and then eventually went to AFI. So he's been a friend for a long time.
Anytime you see a film that really captures your imagination or really just thrusts you in a certain direction, and I think for you it was seeing Blow with Ellen Kuras.
Yes.
Once another great story. Can you just describe why Ellen's work was so impactful to you?
Yeah, I think early on, like in college, before I went to LMU for art history, my girlfriend and I would watch like Trainspotting, Heat, and Blow all the time. These were like our favorite films. We would watch them on repeat in our dorm rooms. And I'm not sure I even understood what was going on there, like camera-wise. I just knew I loved these movies, and they were energetic, and they made me feel cool. And I had no issue watching them multiple times. So then fast forward to when, I'm actually interested in the career, and I couldn't find any information on it. And then, researching film schools and stuff like that, I found her name because I just started looking up my favorite films. And I don't remember what order, but eventually, in the beginning, I wasn't finding many female names. And then I found her name. And it just got me excited, similar to the Bill thing, where it's like you have these bursts of inspiration, throughout your kind of early career or early, journey. And it just made me feel like I could do this. I saw a female's name when I had seen many, men doing it. And then looking at her other work, moving forward, and just being a huge fan of hers in general, has been amazing. And then now I've become friends with her recently. And she came out with me into the New York Films Critics Circle, and she gave me my award that evening and wrote a speech. And it was just like, dream come true. So that story I feel like is very important in my journey because I needed to see her name. I 100% needed to see that name back then.
That's wonderful. I'm from the Bay Area. You're also from the Bay Area, as is Ryan and Zinzi. Something I've found talking with more people from the crew of Sinners is that there's a family. This is like a deep. Obviously, Ryan and Zinzi are inseparable. Ryan and Zinzi are always together, which is totally understanding of how they work and collaborate. And same thing with Ludwig and Serena Goranson. There's just a long history. Even Ryan's editor has been with him since Fruitvale Station. He's really taken these people with him, and they've been there all throughout. You obviously worked with him on Wakanda Forever, the Black Panther film. And so how can you describe the family and the tone that Ryan and Zinzi set and incorporate in all the departments? Because this is like a very stacked from costumes and production design. It's an amazing ensemble.
There's so many layers to that because I feel like, he went to USC, I went to AFI. I love that a lot of those people he met, while he was at school. Very talented people that kind of found each other, right? Kind of meant to be situation where that particular year they grew together. And it's something that I've always valued and kind of finding your community, the people at which like help lift you up, but also believe in you, trust you. You share similar attributes with as far as like how you like to, make films, but also your tastes. And so, I appreciate that he does that. I met him through that similar kind of path where like Bradford Young, Rachel Morrison, these are good friends of mine who recommended me. So, people that know that you'll get along well and that you'll be, a good fit for that whole kind of community. And so, yeah, I came up like that as well as far as like earlier work that I did before meeting Ryan. I work with Gia Coppola a lot and she's one of my best friends and I value that trust that comes with that friendship, but also you make films together. So, yeah, it feels very nice with Ryan to have a team that works so well together, but that also respects each other in that way as far as creativity and what they bring to the table. It's like collaboration at the highest level. And he's also just a really good leader. Like I find that, when you work for people, say 6 to 12 months, a year, you want to believe in them, but you also want them to be good people, that have good families. I mean, Zinzi is someone who's like, she's one of the loveliest people you'll ever meet. She's a huge heart. So, I'm being surrounded by people that I like admire. They're good people. And then in turn, we make, a good film that touches people because that's really what it's about. It's like the connection you have with humanity and, kindness and, seeing others and, like all of that stuff. And so it comes from from the top down. So yeah, I appreciate that with him and, I'll follow him anywhere, to do whatever. So
really cool. Mentioning, 16, The Last Showgirl to me was really exciting to see you do that, with Gia. And then when I found out about this grilled cheese name of what the project for Sinners was, I was like, I don't understand. What does grilled cheese mean? And then when I found out, it's the idea was it was simple, fast, down and dirty,
yeah.
and like a small crew. And we're going to shoot Sinners in 16. And so can you just kind of were you excited about maybe even the idea of Sinners in 16 before you realized that it was just not going to be possible?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about film in general. If you're going to suggest shooting film to me, like win-win, I mean, obviously it's a little funny now looking at like going from 16 to like, 65-15 perf. But I think, he was excited about that and, kind of having that love for the format on Fruitvale Station. And then I hadn't shot a feature on 16, but I've shot on 16 for music videos and, other stuff that I did. So for me, it was most about finding the right lenses because there weren't any that were available that I liked. So I ended up making some with Panavision in the hopes to use them for both pictures, adjust them per story, but like that's kind of the idea that that year I was going to be shooting 16, so I kind of approached it like that. And then when we shifted from that, that was fine, but it was interesting to have such a big shift, right? But that's how he is. I mean, I think with our team, he gets very excited by things, and it's always a discussion, and it's always rooted in the story. So when we did kind of turn it and look at it, for a 65 show, it's not like it was necessarily, I mean, it's a big jump logistically and all of that stuff, but like he had a good, like it was rooted in something that I felt was very important once we started looking at 16, once we started looking at 65, because we did some testing and went into the theater and looked at projections and stuff. So it made sense. It wasn't, both of the pictures could make sense, but I liked how the transition worked for us as well, because picking those two formats, I mean, no one's ever done that before, so we were taking a big leap, but it worked. So
a 16 millimeter of Sinners would be really interesting, like a black and white version, or could have been.
It's different, but you could see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I'm always curious about is, when a director wants to give their collaborators some insight to what they're thinking and what direction to head. Ryan, I feel like from my understanding is there's a script, obviously, which is words on a page, but for the visual language that you need to understand, he puts you in another direction, which when I found out about this, the Eudora Welty photos and the FSA stuff, when I saw that, I was like, that was a moment for me also where I could see how you could then get into his mind. But can you talk about just how Ryan kind of brings you into his mindset and what he's thinking?
Kind of looping in the last question about like, community and working with people that, become family and that you have similar tastes and stuff. Like this story in particular, a lot of our heads of department have, family from the South or culturally have a connection that runs very deep. Myself included, my family, my father was born in New Orleans. That's, my father's side of the family is Creole. So, with that in general, like I've been to the South, like I know how it feels, like I know how it looks, the stories that your grandparents told you. So, when he's sending me a book like the Eudora Welty reference, I'm not obviously like the 30s photographs that are in black and white. I can connect to them based off of like my family, history, but also it's like I could sense what he was after. These photographs have so much humanity in them and so much like beauty, but also pain in them. And he's a very emotional filmmaker, as am I. So it was a really great reference, I think, to start with early on. But he tends to do that. So initially, I read it. I sent him an email with a bunch of stuff in it, because we don't live in the same place. And I gave him my thoughts because I read it the night before I started Showgirl. And then finally, when we had a phone call, he just tells me what he's feeling about, the story, what it means to him. We go over characters, and then he gives me some type of reference. He did it, on Panther. We had the same kind of phone call. So I feel like he's always my biggest inspiration. That's the way that I like to work. The actual director, the person that's telling you, follow me, go to war with me for 6 to 12 months on whatever it is, and believe in me, and I do believe in him. So I want to make sure that when he tells me what the core of the movie is to him in his gut or his soul, that I help reflect that in the photography and the lighting and all that stuff. So that's what I think for me, it's mostly like hearing his voice, hearing what it means to him. And then obviously he throws around references and we'll start to dive into like films like The Thing or something. But to be honest, I mean, I always gravitate towards what he talks about and what's important to him. And then, this one reference he gives me, it's always photography for me, because I think he might have, I'm trying to think of the last film, but I always like a photography reference.
Can you describe when you are shooting a film like Sinners, which is on film, versus something that's digital, and then you have Video Village? How does that change how you and your director and crew are, not like the gut and the instinctual kind of habits that you have maybe when you're shooting digital or film. Can you describe that, and having a video tab and dailies, and then, on the digital side, you're having Video Village and you can watch back and have like the reassurance that it's all in the can?
It's a completely different animal, honestly. And I prefer shooting film. I think, and I would say now, like Ryan and I having this experience, it's a preference, right? I think the set is run in a completely different way. There's a respect there. There's a pacing that's different. My relationship to the image and how I work with my team is completely different because, as a DP, I'm operating, but also I'm the only one that knows the exposure. And I know, that it is going to expose. And then when I can it up and put it in, the box to go ship to photochem, like I'm the one that has a sense of what that's going to look like until it comes back, a day later for everyone else to see, in the telecine. So I like that. I like that kind of, it's an exciting kind of place to make an image and be creative. There's no fear involved for me. Like, I think the fear that people put on you that aren't comfortable with film, is why maybe a lot of people aren't shooting it, right? Because production will say, well, it's too expensive. There's going to be too many issues, and I'm too scared, so I don't want to do that. So let's shoot digital and make it look like film because that's easier, like this type of thing. I don't like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a format for everything. I think for that film, that was a perfect marriage of, like those formats, 65, the way it looks, what it meant. But, it's all rooted in this old photograph, right? So it's like, it makes sense to shoot it that way. Like, you want to infuse all of that into the image. And yeah, I don't mind. I mean, the HD tap is not something that anyone should be looking at as a reference of what the film looks like. It's just kind of there to show like what, you're framing essentially. So yeah, I prefer that, right? Because everyone's now paying attention to what's in front of them, the actors in front of them, the light in the space. It's not about a digital, monitor that's completely perfectly calibrated to look like your final image, so that like 20 to 40 people can crowd around it and start giving you notes about what they don't like. I don't like that. That it's just not, it doesn't feel that it feels counterproductive at times, with that, so yeah, so I have a whole like slew of kind of, reasons why I prefer film. And also like I came up in film, it's when I went to AFI, all of my projects were shot on film. My first feature was on 35. Every film that made me want to be a filmmaker was shot on film. But I dabble in commercials a lot between projects. And so it's, Panther was shot on digital. So if anything, I try to make my digital look like film. But as far as like projection and all the different formats that are available to show a picture on 65, I take that very seriously. I want that digital projection to look beautiful and to have the character and the soul that a film print does have. And I think that you can do that. And if you have the right colorist and if you have the right eye for it, it can still be a beautiful experience, even though it's a digital projection. So I do appreciate that, as far as, the output and giving more opportunities for people to see it if they can't get to a film projection.
Something about Ryan that I've always really admired is his use of sound, his understanding of sound. In this film, it seemed like usually the larger format cameras, because they are so noisy, you'd want to avoid using them for dialogue scenes. And yet there are times in this film when he is using the IMAX camera for dialogue scenes. So can you just describe your kind of understanding of working, with production, and like, what's the dance between trying to preserve performance? Like, where did you guys kind of draw the line when it came to these loud camera and then also trying to capture that performance?
It's such a beautiful tool that like it's kind of like what I was saying before about when you shoot film, like, everybody has to be on board. There's a respect that's there. There's a kind of acknowledgement of what it is you're doing and how important it is. And so everyone kind of crowds around that and is supportive of that. And I feel like with the IMAX format being a non-sync sound camera, that energy is the same. Whereas like, actors know the beauty of the image that can be created. And so they're on board to like make that scene be an IMAX, even though they need to, the camera is 2 feet from their face and sounds like a lawnmower. And then later on, months down the line, they have to kind of re-embody that character and do the ADR. So it's a lot to ask. but for such a beautiful, cause. And I think Ryan saw that, as we were shooting more, into the movie and our schedule, he could feel it. He could feel that he wanted to change a couple of these scenes into IMAX. And it's so funny because, the two scenes I talk about the most for myself that I love weren't supposed to be in IMAX. They're supposed to be in, Ultra Panavision 70. So the fact that he changed those, it was like I think a few days before, or like maybe the end of the week prior. But it was a huge decision, a beautiful decision, and so now I have these favorite scenes, in my life forever because it was his bravery. Essentially, he was like he makes this bold choice to say, you know what, this is what it has to be. The scene will be better for it. Let me talk to the actors and see if they're on board. And then they said yes, of course, and we work around that. And so I have respect for that type of decision, even though it is going to make it a little more tricky, but it's worth it.
I think I know the scenes you're talking about. So this is, well, when I realized, or when I found out that the opening of the movie was going to be Remick going to the farmhouse,
Yes.
but then it became Sammy going to the church,
Yes.
which is, yeah. So did you guys know that the Sammy one was going to be the opening, and that's when you shifted to IMAX?
No. Well, I didn't, and this was a while ago, but no. That's, they find that kind of groove in the editorial process with him and Shaver, and they did such an elegant job of like, making these scenes flow really well, from different formats, into one and out of the other. But no, I think he changed it because he felt the scene would be better for it. But it wasn't a conversation like, I think I'm going to now open the movie with this. I want to shoot it on IMAX. I'm 100% sure that, or at least that wasn't discussion we had. It was just, I think that this scene should be in IMAX, and let me make sure that the actors are okay with it. That's my favorite, the church one. And then the farmhouse scene is my other favorite, so those two, yeah. Yeah. They weren't.
The production design on both of those, and obviously like the wind, just the reality of capturing end of day, golden hour. Like when I learned more about how you capture that farmhouse scene, I just appreciate it even more, because as an audience member, you're just in the movie, you're in the story, and we don't realize the pain that went into capturing that. It was really cool for both those scenes. Yeah.
No, it's not easy, but filmmaking is not easy.
Yeah. Going back to, you're talking about lensing, the story about you working with Dan Sasaki at Panavision, and then learning about you're using the lens, the 50 and the 80 that were from Oppenheimer. How does that creative constraint, like how is that exciting for you, just having two focal lengths and not really, that's it, you have to figure out how to use those to your best ability?
I think for me, it's mostly like and I've said this, in other, like when I talk about just my process, the lens is for me the most important choice in anything that I do, because it's the eye that all the audience sees the film, right? It's like I'm putting something, whatever I'm putting through that lens is going to give that emotion. It's going to tell that story. And it's super important to me personally, as a choice. And so, that glass, I have an appreciation for Panavision glass. I mostly shoot Panavision my whole career. I have a really close relationship with Dan, and he knows how I like to shoot. And so, when I tested those lenses, and obviously I saw, Oppenheimer, but when I tested them, they were the best choice for the film. And in choosing them and in kind of going that direction and not using other lenses, that were available, it gave me those restrictions. And then in discussing with Ryan, he felt that would be okay, that we could tell that story with those two focals. And then I had an idea, and because I love, a lot of like fall off and field curvature and aberrations, I had an idea to make an 80, like a close-up lens that had, more aggressive characteristics that we could use. I didn't really have a plan for it, but kind of pitched it to Dan, and he's like, yeah, I can do that. So he made that for us. And then, I showed Ryan, and he's like, oh, beautiful. And, he gets really into that stuff because I'll nerd out about lenses, and he's a big nerd on that too. So, we knew we would be using it for something, in the film, and it could be like a creative choice. So that's where I think those, we used this Petzval 80, which was the new lens for IMAX at the end of the picture when Annie is holding the baby in that kind of surreal moment, where Smoke is looking, back at her like a dream. And so it was very beautiful. And I remember that day, it was very pretty that day. Clouds kept coming in and out, which was tricky, but it's a very emotional day, as you can imagine, because that scene itself, like Michael's performance, and it was so beautiful. So it was perfect to have that and use it there.
Something I want to ask you about is my understanding is Ryan likes to storyboard pretty much the whole movie.
Mhm.
What's your comfort of knowing like you've kind of shaken out all the scenes, but like how much play do you like to have on set in terms of also finding stuff that's not in the storyboards? Like what's Ryan's kind of comfort level in terms of being true to the storyboarding process and then when you're on set?
What people need to understand is like storyboarding itself is not like it depends on the director, but it's not always to make the exact frame that's in the movie, right? It's a way to kind of, get inspired, but also put something in your prep process so that you have an understanding of how you want to break down the scene, what you need, time constraints, and if they're more complex shots that have to do with like VFX, that you have something, kind of mapped out, right? It's a plan. And then if you have really specific shots that you're interested in, it's a way to kind of share those with other people and be like, this is a really cool shot that we want to execute. This is the way it looks. And then you can start discussing that, whether it's storyboarding or previs. I think I remember him saying like, I don't know if this is true. I forget, but I don't know. I remember on Wakanda, he was like, I want to storyboard more this time because I didn't get to like everything last time. I think it'll be helpful or whatever. But what I love about him is like, just because we storyboard doesn't mean that that's what we're doing. It can change on the day. And why I have to kind of, do that for myself is I'm so much a person that likes to watch the blocking and see what the space feels like once you're there with a finder, and you're watching what Michael's doing in his rehearsal with Woomy. Like it's all there for you to grab, with the actors in the real space and connect emotionally. And when you're, mapping something out in prep and drawing it in an office with horrible fluorescent lighting and Hannah hasn't even built the set yet, that's not the place for me to be making all these decisions. You can have a game plan, but I appreciate it now because, we spend time with our AD. It's really, really helpful. It allows me to like, just have something in my head to begin with. But I would say for myself, like, I like that we can change it on the day. That doesn't bother me. And then also, that, it really comes alive when you're in the space, like how you want to block out the scene or cover the scene.
What's your take on DPs who operate and how did you build kind of the understanding with your crew and what's your kind of balance? I saw there's footage of you on the wheels. There's like different instances when you are operating. Do you always want to be in that position or how do you treat it?
I prefer operating. I mean, I came up operating. I'm a, DP operator, but also like I don't know how else to be a DP if I'm not operating the camera. I think I veered from that when I did Loki, because I had to. Like it was my first like really big project where I was shooting multiple cameras, and it was very important for me. We had so many different sets, and I just wanted to make sure I, was like mapping things out properly. And lighting's very important to me, so I want to make sure that that's good. And we're shooting on digital, so in that instance, but I think, being able to explain what you want and like have a real good sense of like, your own compositions. And if you can, relay that to an operator, in a very succinct way in that they understand where you're coming from, that's what you're doing, right? As a DP, you're leading and you're letting someone know this is my vision and, I'm handing it to you to carry out, but like, this is what I want. So that's a really good skill to have. But like for me, it's like I'd rather just do it myself if appropriate. And also Ryan prefers me to be next to him. I mean, he likes to be next to the camera. And it's a lot of work. Like especially on this movie was a lot of work. Just operating a camera with the two formats, exposing and lighting and just really making sure you're using a lot of brain power essentially. But the movie's better for it because it comes from you. Like no one else knows what my eyes, these are my eyes. And like I said, you can explain that to someone on comms, that's over there and you're 20 feet behind them. But it's always better if I do it. So yeah, I mean, I don't do Steadicam obviously, but I'll do the crane and the wheel. I'll do everything except for the Steadicam. And then I love my B camera operator who I've worked with for many years, who worked on Panther as well. And so he's someone I trust and have been working with a long time. And so for that camera, he's my right hand for that, and knows how I like to use that camera, because that's very specific to a DP too, how they like to use a B camera.
Yeah, I was just thinking of for Black Panther, you were on, I think, the Venice too, right?
Yeah, I was on Sony Venice for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you go that to something that's like twice as heavy. It's like when you grab it, you're physically grabbing it. You're like kind of encompassing your whole body to physically move it around. At what point did you cross that threshold of realizing just the sheer weight and volume of this camera?
It's not ergonomic, so it's not about its own beautiful machine. So I will change how I work with a camera for it, right? Whereas like if I'm on Sony Venice, I build that camera out so that it's good for my ergonomics. Like I'm making it good for me to hold on easy rig or to cradle or whatever. But with the IMAX camera, like she's telling me what I need to do. And I do feel that way. It's like it's its own thing that needs respect. That is, it's like a little fridge, I always say, on your shoulder. And so when I first approached it, it's just uncomfortable. And also I'm a left eye operator, so the eyepiece is very close to the body of the camera. So I can't operate that camera with my left eye, so I had to use it on board. But it's also a 2.5 minute mag, so it's not on your shoulder for very long. We do various work throughout the film. It's not all handheld or anything like that. And obviously not every scene is IMAX. So yeah, but we're not using, and we don't handhold the a System 65. That's like 100 pounds. That camera belongs on a dolly.
When we talk about the juke, obviously, like when I learned that was on a Steadicam, but what's exciting about just knowing that you're doing so many firsts with this film? I mean, especially that the juke in and of itself, it's a milestone type of shot and composition of what you guys pulled off.
I mean, every time I'm doing anything with Ryan, it's a first mentality, and I don't mentality in the sense of like, he'll have an idea, and we don't solve it by saying like, let's do this because we'll be the first, or anything like that. We creatively solve a problem, to make a beautiful shot or make it the best it can be. And then, later on you're thinking about it or it comes out, they're like, oh yeah, this has never been done before. But I'm not sure it's always like, it doesn't seem like that. But what I meant by the mentality is like, he just like likes to think big, So, I remember, and I always talk about Wakanda, it's like, we're shooting a bunch of people acting underwater for the first time. Like literally they're doing all their performance underwater. We're not doing it for fake, not a fake thing. Like we want it to feel real. It's always rooted in that kind of, like as much as we can make it true, like filmmaking, what we all fell in love with to begin with, in front of us, the Lawrence of Arabia aspect of everything that, can be like grand and have scope. So that's why I feel like when he wrote that sequence, it came from the heart, but it was, no one's ever written something like that before. So you want to try and, do everything you can to make it, all be in camera. And so the logistics of the format mean that it cannot be on Steadicam with a full 1,000-foot load. It has to be downspooled. So then you work around that aspect, right? It wasn't going to be on a crane. It was going to be on a human. So then, you have 75 seconds. So then you have to have 3 stitch points because you have the song that's a certain amount of time. So it's just all these things that you kind of puzzle together, find the solve for the technical of it, but make sure that it's not rooted in the technical. It's, at the end of the day, it needs to feel, soulful and cinematic. And so that's really the core, because that's what's on the page. He's written it like that. So you don't want to lose that when you start messing with it.
When I learned more about the juke, because obviously as an audience member, I'm like, that's the most magical wonder I've ever experienced. And then when you start to, if you really want to like take the magic out of the shot and learn more about it, which, I obviously did, I was fascinated by how the departments, this is like a team sport in the sense of what the juke had to be, because there's a transition going through the ceiling where it's a visual effect shot. And obviously like you're talking about the stitch points, but when there are shots like this, and especially when I think of the train station too, to the audience members, will never know the magic that you guys are pulling off. But can you talk about just incorporating all the departments, how does Ryan once again bring his team together and figure out the best solution? Because when I realized how much time was spent for each of the segments, it seems to me that there's so much thought and care put into it, that it seems part of ingrained with Ryan's process.
It's how our team collaborates. Like, it's the authority he gives each department to like pour themselves into it, but also just like everyone has a say. Your opinion matters. It's not all about one department. Any great filmmaker knows that. It's never about one department. Like, I'm only as good as the structure. Like, I have nothing to light if there's no structure. So my collaboration with Hannah is, paramount to my success as far as like being able to create a beautiful shot. I have this relationship with her that there's so much trust there, and she does so much homework, and she's very thoughtful in her decisions. And I want to make sure I respect that and I shine a light on that because it matters, and it makes the scene better. And also my team as well. Like, when I work with my gaffer, Brian Bartolini, I've been working with him for over 10 years. And so when we approach stuff like that, we want it to feel, we want the lighting to be a character, but we also want it to feel of the space. And so that requires us to collaborate very closely with production design. And my key grip, Miguel Benavides, like, he's also someone where it's like, when you're shooting a movie in the summer in New Orleans, it is not easy. We have cranes everywhere. Our rigging crews do so much work. So with Ryan, like, he has a respect for all departments. It's not necessarily always, it's like lighting, grip, art department, fixtures, like all of these departments. He sees all of them, he knows them on set. Like, they're all part of like the core at which is making the film, and it feels that way. And so when you give people that respect and, you consider them and you give them that authority, they work very hard for you and they care, and so that's what really comes from him. He's really lovely at doing that. He's obviously played sports, and I do feel like there's that mentality is like, people look up to him, and he's a great leader, and it works very, very well in filmmaking. And just being a great director, you need that. So yeah, I think that's, when we have these complex sequences, it's everybody doing their best work in order to execute. Because another thing is, like, with that space, we have to be able to move the camera around 360. So we have to come up with a lighting plan that doesn't get in the way of VFX, so that VFX isn't spending all their time having to erase our gear. There's a respect there, like trying to keep everything out of the shot. Michael Ralla knows that I like to do as much in camera as possible. So our relationship is very close in the sense of, like, he knows that any VFX that's ever done in a film, the best VFX is when you're not doing a lot. Like, you're using as much as what's in camera, and then you're collaborating so well that, like, you don't see the VFX. Like, I don't want to see VFX in a film. To me, that's not good VFX if I can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. The use of color and darkness and shadow and just everything that you do, all the considerations as an audience member. The Sammy scene, like, editorially, is just haunting as hell because of the jump scares and like how they kind of pull the audience in through those moments. But when I think of this shot of when we see the trio of Remick and that 50-foot like movie bird crane shot that you did when it pulls back and the reveal, and then Ludwig's music as it hits with the cut, chilling. Like, it really, to me, was a magical moment, and we're introduced to these. We don't know who they are, but they don't feel safe. Can you talk about your use of darkness? And I love your approach, how you treat moonlight and source of moonlight.
No, I love that shot too. Just to go back to that for 2 seconds. I remember when I first saw it, and I went and told Ryan, because I think there was some temp score on it, and then the way him and Shaver edited it, I was just like, that's a banger. Like, it just hits really amazing with that shot. And I remember when we shot it, I was on the crane, and just Jack likes performance, and we had to do, we did it a few times. It was just a very strong close up. So I remember thinking, like, that's an amazing shot. So it was really cool to see it all put together. But yeah, I think for me, it's always got to be rooted in what's there, right? Like, that's what's going to look the most beautiful, feel the most cinematic to me. And then there is a stylized naturalism that I like to find, in that kind of realistic world. And if we're talking about these night exteriors in the 30s, the biggest source is the moon, right? So, I am making a kind of vampire gangster movie, so people are on board with top light and it being moodier, and which tends to mean if someone's out in the open, underneath the sky and the only source is the moon, you're going to get, sometimes darker eyes. And that has to be okay because that's what would be if it was real. Like if I'm putting a big softbox on the ground to keylight somebody, that's not how they would be lit in the 1930s. So I'm not going to do that. Even though it's going to get more into their eyes and stuff like that. So yeah, I find that like there's this dance that I always have to have because I do feel like I want it to feel and look real. That's what's going to be the best for the actors when they step on set. That's what's going to be the best for the story. And then there are these kind of like hints of stylized lighting where like maybe, your SFX fog catches some of the hard light that you've used to kiss the trees. And now you have all these heavy shafts behind the trio. So yes, there are these moments that like, can kind of, become more surrealistic in the movie. But I do tend to love top light, and I like my night exteriors to have top light, and then putting layers of light, in the background, foreground, and midground, just kissing light on things because your eye always needs the layers of exposure. I find that, where you have a hot spot or something is more dim, but it needs all those different levels. So it's your job to kind of evaluate the space that you're lighting and make sure that those points of light are all balanced correctly. So it's a lot of work. Our rigging team is amazing. Our rigging team in New Orleans was amazing. I was very lucky to have such an amazing team out there. And they did a fantastic job because we had a lot of machines out there and it was a lot of work and a lot of cable and it was a lot. They're big night exteriors, especially when we're shooting 500T on 15 perf.
The thing that I was so curious of what your take was, how do you handle darker skin tones, especially at nighttime? Like, what to you? Because I know you like to underexpose, which I think comes across, stylistically appropriate and great storytelling, like you were just talking about with shadows in the eyes and whatnot. What have you learned from just working with darker skin tones? What to you is, there's no rules obviously, but what to you is kind of your own comfort level in terms of where you like your exposures to be with darker skin tones?
It's just a personal experience. Like when I'm shooting film, that's what I was saying before. It's like exposure is so personal. Like I don't come from the school of thought of like, if you're going to take a class and someone's going to be like, the silver layer, like how much do I need to expose? And like all of the, it's like giving someone a technical kind of explanation of how they should expose film. Like film to me is like you go out there, you take film, you make mistakes, you see where you like your highlights, you see where you like your shadows to be and your skin tones. And, it's all just trial and error, obviously early on in my career, finding that really nice place. And then, just being able to, in my career, being able to shoot a lot of film. So, then there comes that bravery with film where it's like, you know what you're looking at, you know what it's going to look like, after the fact, right? Like you don't, you're brave. I mean, there's no fear there. You have a relationship where you're like, you're looking at it with your eye and you know exactly how it's going to look on film, whether it's 16, whether it's 65. It was really nice to revisit film and shoot The Last Showgirl that same year. Cause I will say, and Ryan actually brought this up. He's like, I think that was really important. And that was cool that you could kind of, find it again and have that relationship with exposure. And that was a film that didn't have a lot of resources. So I was using a lot of practical lighting, using the sun and, just like feeling the space, in a very, gritty format, grainy format. And then going from that, cause I have the same approach. I mean, it's not like I'm like, oh, now I'm shooting 65. I got to change everything I'm doing. I do the exact same thing. It's just, I do my tests, obviously, and it's more about how I want to light, the film itself and what those key lights are. If they're gem balls double diffused with muslin, or is it like a bare bulb, or, is it bounce light? Like those are things I work out with my team, in prep. I'm a person of color. My family are people of color. Like I know what looks beautiful in certain shades of brown and black. And, there's different reflective colors and dark skin that I think is beautiful. I don't like to overlight black people. I think a lot of people do that because they're fearful of like, oh, something's darker, so I need to put a lot of light on it. Like that makes no sense to me. So yeah, I think it's a very personal relationship I have with how I like these skin tones to look. And I've figured figured that out through the years of, that's where it sits for me. And so it's nice when people tell you after they see the film that your community tells you that everyone looked beautiful and they appreciated that, because sometimes it can go where someone over lights and they don't like that.
Just closing out, I mean, you were on the Dolby podcast, and I love to talk to you about your collaboration with Kostas, your colorist. When I found out about his projects, working with Nolan, we're obviously working with you on The Last Showgirl. I was like, okay, this is someone who really has a understanding of film, and obviously you guys have a wonderful relationship. But the question I want to ask you is, I mean, this movie was released in just a variety of formats. How do you maintain your intention of what you had on the large formats with IMAX, and how does that carry over to your Dolby Vision grade? And what surprised you about things that you experienced in Dolby Vision?
I had such a wonderful time working with Kostas. I love my team at Photochem. I love my dailies colorist, John Rock. Kostas and John I met on The Last Showgirl. So, it was nice to meet them on that picture. And then also with Kostas, like I shot that movie. And in that instance, it's really the LUT that he made, for the final grade. Like we didn't do that much in the final grade because he approaches it very similar where it's like, you want to, like you're shooting the film, like even though I'm shooting film and I know I'm going to do a DI because I'm shooting a movie with, twins, that there aren't two people, there's only one. So you already know there's a lot of VFX, so you're going to do a DI. But at the core of the way that Kostas likes to work is like, when we shoot it, we look at prints together and the prints are our hero. So everything is rooted in how the print looks, because why would you want to go shoot film and not make it look exactly like what it should look like? And his eye is so like perfected for that. And like, to be honest, like his whole being is perfected for that. Like he has that kind of sensibility where he feels it. He knows what feels right. He knows the grain. And when you kind of find that, level of highlight and shadow with him, like he protects it throughout all formats, and I'm there with him when he's grading. And so we're walking through this together, but early on in our prep, we're looking at prints together and we're, he's giving me notes and then he's making a LUT that really emulates what that should look like to match the print. So yeah, he's the perfect person for this job, but also I just enjoy being around him because I don't want to be in a room with a colorist that I don't like for hours on end.
That's not a good relationship.
Yeah. So I just enjoyed my time with him. He's a lovely human being. And I feel like the grade is better for that because he's a good person, to be honest. Like, first and foremost, I like him as a person, and he just happens to be like one of the best colorists. So I got lucky, it's like both those things. So yeah, I mean, we're chasing it in each format. And so I loved that we would sit there together and, we would do our notes and we would go over everything, but it's like, we would make sure that every single format, digital projection, or DCP, and we would go look at it together at, Playa Vista and the IMAX theater. And then we would look at our prints together at Photochem. And then when we did our Dolby pass, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, I fell in love with the Dolby pass. Like, I cannot say this enough. Like, the deep blacks, like I remember I walked into the Dolby pass, and Kostas knew it. Kostas like, just wait till you see this Dolby pass. I know you're going to love it, because he was grading it there. And then I came in to do the QC. And I walked in there and I remember texting Ryan because Ryan showed up a little later and I was like, you have to fucking get down here. This shit looks bananas. Like, it looks amazing. Like, I have a new love. Like, every time I was just falling in love with, but it was all rooted in making it look and feel like a print. But the Dolby Pass has its own personality, like with the blacks, and I really appreciated that contrast because it was a nice, it's its own thing, but it was very beautiful, and it still had the character and the soul of what we did in the film, in the projection room, So that's what I love so much. So I enjoyed that a lot, and I remember when I saw it after the final, and I went to a screening, and a couple people messaged me and was like, it looks amazing. And I was like, what did you see? And they're like, oh, I saw the Dolby. And I was like, oh, cool, because they hadn't gotten around to seeing the print, which is, obviously my favorite. But I really love the Dolby. So it was very fun. I had a great time. That was my first experience, I think, doing, being able to see it in that Dolby theater.
That's so cool. Thinking of highlights, I love how you expose, I think some of your skies, whether they're sky replacements or not, which most of the time they weren't, especially like in the store with Smoke going to the general store. And I was like, thank God we can see out in the street. Like we can see what's going on out there. What is it about highlights that you love protecting?
It's just a personal thing. I mean, honestly, I can't stand like severe overexposure, especially in digitals. In film, you have a little bit more leeway there, but I still want to see everything because if I want something to blow out, that's a choice, but I can do that later. I'd rather bring up the shadow. I'd rather have the highlight exposed, bring up the shadows, than have the highlights overexposed and my shadows exposed well, It's just a personal choice, but also I think it takes a lot more light and it takes a lot more work when you do things like that. So, you have to be on board to like ask for what you need and rigging and like having that level of light, obviously costs a bit more money, when you're doing that. And my team is great. So it's like, we're always making sure, at least because of the way that I like to do that, is that when I have spaces, and it's a very fine balance, because what you don't want to do is like overlight your interior so that it looks like you've lit the shit out of the interior, and now everyone knows that the reason why you did that was so that you could expose the window. So it's a very fine line. I think the store is a really beautiful example of that marriage, because we had those shots where you have to really balance your exposures well, especially on a very sunny day, in New Orleans, that when she's inside and coming outside and then coming back inside, and there's an iris pool and there's all this stuff going on. So it takes a lot of planning and a lot of work, but the scenes are better for it when you do it that way. So yeah, it's just a personal irritation I have.
It's a good irritation. I think it's totally like worth the effort. To me, I appreciate it too. Autumn, last question here. I think, as you described, Ryan is doing a lot of firsts. And I think this idea of you being nominated, being, I think, the fourth woman in cinematography category to have this honor. Can you describe the experience of meeting other DPs who are kind of in that situation like you were when you saw Ellen's work and you kind of felt that, like, not even a sense of hope, but there's a role model, there's a direction. What does that mean to you to know that you're offering that to up and coming aspiring female DPs?
It means everything to me. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't do this many Q&As and put myself out there this much, because I have a lot, and it's not easy. Like it's a lot, this award season. But I think because I'm so proud of the film and I'm so proud of our team and Ryan, like, it's easy for me to talk about, we made it with good people, and it's an important film. Like, what he wrote is so important. And so I enjoy letting people know, how special he is and how special the film is. So that allows me to go out there and have like so many girls come up to me, or, young boys that look like me or from the same background or whatever it is. It's like, that means the world to me. And I think that's what you wanted when you were getting into film, when you were starting out. It's like, I really looked up to, like Ellen, and it took me a long time to meet her. Or I remember the first time I met Matty Libatique, I was so nervous to talk to him, but he was so important to me, finding out that there's this amazing DP. He's Filipino. His work was so impactful early on in my career, as well. And so it's like, to be able to be in that place now for other kids and, give them hope, or to like, show them like, I'm doing it, so you can do it. I mean, I think that means a lot to me. And Ryan knows that, he knows I appreciate that, and that I don't mind putting myself out there, because that's what makes it all feel worth it, that energy that you put into it. If that's all you're going to get out of it, because I think awards, it can be, there's so many great things, and there's not always one best. But we do value, like in our, community, we value these things. So I can only hope for the best for women in film, because it does mean a lot, these milestones that women have been able to make. It does matter. So I just hope for the best, but I know that I'm getting out of it. Like, when the girls come up to me, that's a lot.
Well, Autumn, congratulations on this incredible achievement. I mean, this film, I think as I've gone back to it, I've just found more things I love about it. And I think it's going to be one of those staples for, I think, you and Ryan, just because this team and everything you put into it, your hearts show up on show up on the screen. And I'm really grateful for your time. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the Dolby podcast today.
Thank you. You had great questions. Thank you.
Many thanks to Autumn for joining us on the podcast today, and thank you especially to producer Michael for hosting such a fantastic conversation. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Warner Brothers for helping us put this conversation together. Be sure to check out Sinners. It's now streaming on HBO Max in glorious Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And as I mentioned up top, this episode is part of our ongoing coverage of the 98th Academy Awards, coming to you live on Sunday, March 15th from the Dolby Theater here in Hollywood. As we do every year, we've been hosting many conversations with nominees in sound, cinematography, and original score categories. So be sure you are subscribed to us here at Dolby Creator Talks. You can do that by simply searching for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts, or you can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes, including those links to the previous episodes on Sinners, one with the team behind the Best Sound nomination, and another with composer Ludwig Göransson, who is going for his third Oscar for Best Score. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer, editor, and guest host for the day is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.